Oh, sorry. Okay, everybody. Can I get the KW agents to come to the front, please? All the KW agents come to the front, including you, Alicia, Kelly, Tara.
Hi, oh yes, oh Kelly.
Awesome. And Lori. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight to the Travis County Focus for How to Fight Your Property Taxes. We're so excited you're here. My name is Laura Ivy Blessing. I'm with Keller Williams, and we are all here with Keller Williams. Everyone start and introduce yourself.
I'm Donna Andruck.
I'm Alicia Ross.
I'm Tara Lopez.
Kelly Menifee.
Tex Tubbs.
Deborah Johnson. Lori Flood.
Yes, and we are the best Keller Williams agents in town. So please send us all of your business and all of your referrals, and I hope that you learned a ton tonight. We want to take a second to thank our sponsors, which is Mike Hammer, Allstate, and also Oak Mortgage, Melanie Taliaferro. Mike actually wants to come up and say a few words. He's got some education for us as well. So Mike, I'll hand over the mic to you.
Thank you.
Mike is the mic. Thank you guys.
All right, guys, thanks a lot. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thanks again. I want to talk a little bit about, because Jeff, he's got the show tonight. That's what y'all came for. You don't hear some insurance guy like me, but there's a couple things that I want to say that kind of make sense a little bit, that kind of fits in with the appraisal. Every one of our homes, every one of our houses, whether we realize it or not, actually they're sitting with 3 different values out there. One of them is right. When you pull your appraisal, you got the appraisal value. Okay, then you got what the real estate people say, where they say, I've got my market value, and then you got the insurance company saying it's my replacement value. So when you look at those 3 things, the number one question we actually had it today at the agency was, well, my house is worth $430,000. I want to insure it for that, because that's what an appraisal said. Well, remember, you got dirt, not going to burn. Rocks aren't going to burn. Okay? The commissions and the location and the market value is not going to burn. The companies are only interested in replacing that structure and that board and the roof. Okay? So look at that real close. There could be some savings, because you could be over-insuring your house. The company doesn't want to do that. However, there's some automatic things that are kicked in every year that moves up a little bit to keep up with building costs. The company's really not trying to cheat you, even though we all think so. I get that. But they're really not. They just want to stay on the values. But it's always good every 3 or 4 years to sit down with your insurance agent or your advisor. If you don't have one, if you don't like it, I'm a pretty good guy. I'd be glad to help you out, even if you're not even with me whatsoever. I'll help you through that process to make sure that your house is insured properly. And once you do that, and once you understand that, then you could get some savings, kind of on the backside. Don't forget about your deductibles. Have your deductible as high as you can push it. High, everybody's checkbook, everybody's pocketbook, everybody's savings account is different than everybody else's. So try to push it as high as you can, because that is the biggest number that will push your premium down. Average claim is about, on a homeowner policy, is about 1, 5, 6, 7 years. Luckily in Travis County, actually is the least, how am I say it? Travis County is the county that has the least amount of claims on homeowner policies in the state of Texas. And that's State Farm, Allstate, all of them. Okay, so we're in a really good place, because we don't have all the hail. They had, 4 hailstorms up in Dallas and all that kind of stuff. Those premiums are 3 times what ours are here. So anyhow, okay, I'm taking way too much time. I know, way too much time. They don't let me talk much. So if y'all have any other questions specifically, I'll be in the back right here. Diane Tanner, my #1 office manager. There she is right there. We're glad to help any which way we can. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your time. Listen to Jeff. He's a good guy.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, I get the pleasure of introducing the famous Jeff Bullard, who's been heavily involved in Texas property taxation issues for the past 34 years. You don't even look that old. So he's assisted in the management of property tax liability for over $64 billion in real estate and business personal property, negotiating actual tax savings in excess of $61 million. He's a graduate of California Polytechnic State University in California, earning a bachelor's degree in both business administration and economics. Returning to Texas immediately upon graduation, he took an appraisal position with the Williamson County Appraisal District in 1981. It's a good year, right? Entering private practice in 1986, he has been leading advocate of property taxpayer rights and frequent speaker on Texas property tax system. His employer, Texas ProTax, Austin Inc., represents major commercial real estate owners, financial institutions, and corporations, as well as literally tens of thousands of individual taxpayers in annually contesting property tax valuations in Central Texas. He also does my tax protests. Thank you, and he's amazing. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. I do live and breathe property taxes, so I'm not the most exciting guy you've ever met. How many here have actually done tax appeals on your own property before? Good, good. It was in Travis County, I think. Can everybody hear me? We're okay? Excellent. When you did one, you did tax. Did you go to a formal or informal hearing?
Informal.
Informal? Met with the staff? Was that in a recent year?
Last year.
Just last year. Excellent. Anyone else? There was a couple over here on this side.
Williamson County is informal.
Williamson informal?
It's been about
They're very nice, aren't they? They're very friendly there. Yes, ma'am?
Travis County,
Travis?
about 2 years ago.
Okay, about 10 years ago. Well, I will tell you, yes, sir.
In Williamson County, had one of the guys actually fall asleep.
Oh, you went to a formal hearing then and met the appraisal review board? Well, we met 3 of them anyway, the 4th. You know, I actually, a funny story. If anyone's been here long enough to remember Fresh Plus Groceries here in Austin, well, one of the owners or founders of Fresh Plus Groceries was on the appraisal review board for Travis County, and I don't know what his age was, but it was old. And he fell asleep in the hearing, and one of the other board members, you know, I noticed, and I stopped talking, and he looked over at him, and he said, "Just keep going, we'll wake him up if we need his vote." So, you know, it does happen. It's a volunteer position. It's not very, you know, it's not a lot of thanks for being an ARB member. You know, you get people yell at you, and that's not a good thing. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about the basics of property taxation in Texas, something that everyone here should know. You need to know about exemptions. You need to know about deadlines for filing protests. You need to know just the basics, just so that you're an informed homeowner. And then I'd like to, if you may, I'd like to break into the real guts of the Travis Central Appraisal District's methodology, so that you know exactly, and you should leave here tonight with a pretty good primer on the vocabulary you need to know. I'll give you a great deal of tactics that you will employ in your appeals. I think primarily it's be nice and be ready. That's it. Don't walk in there uninformed, and don't walk in with a chip on your shoulder. And do not, for whatever you do not say, "I just want to pay my fair share." They hear that every day. They have a whole lecture for that. You know, we're not interested in what your taxes are. We're setting just the value. That's what the appraisal district will say. My taxes went up so much. They don't care. That's not their job. Their job at the Travis Central Appraisal District is to establish a fair and equitable valuation on your property, so that then the taxing units, which have an ever-increasing voracious appetite for money, will then attach their tax rate to it and levy a tax that you then pay at the end of the year. But all of it is predicated on the validity of the value that you have some input in. The property tax system in Texas is the best in the nation. You have more input on your property tax valuation than in virtually any other state in the union. I mean, we do, of course, do national surveys. Texas has always been at the forefront of property taxation. Why? Because we need that revenue, right? We do not have a federal income tax. So property taxes has always been the mainstay of local government in Texas. So along those lines, I did hand out, or Laura did, and thank you very much, by the way. I would agree with her, having known her now for years, about the quality of her service to her clients. You cannot, as in property taxation, much of the time it's difficult for you to do this yourself. One, you don't have the data. Two, you're not there every single day. Three, you don't know who you're talking to at the appraisal district. I know all three of those things. This is all we do, is prepare for and present property tax appeals. Our firm is by far the largest in town. Are there any pro-tax clients here? It's rare that I don't have, half a dozen. We represent something over 22,000 clients and over probably approaching 40,000 parcels now. So that's a lot out of a $400,000 roll. And I'll talk briefly at the end. This is not an advertisement for our firm. We turn down more people than we accept as clients. I mean, that's a heck of a position to be in, but there are only so many of us. There's 20 full-time agents, and all we do is go over to the appraisal district and call their baby ugly. It's great. But I did produce a little property tax calendar. I want to breeze through this because as a taxpayer, there's two dates you really need to pay attention to. One of them is January 1st. So circle January 1st. That is a really important date in property taxation. It's the qualifying date for exemptions, for your homestead exemption. It's also the effective date of the tax appraisal of your property. What does that mean? Does anybody remember Judy Maggio? Longtime anchor on the TXAN here in town, or KI, I don't remember which one it was. Judy's house unfortunately burned down to the ground on January 3rd one year. Sorry, Judy. She paid taxes on that house as if it was standing the whole year. Because on January 1st, there it was. And so that triggers a few things, that January 1st date, and I'll talk about them in just a minute. The next date, all the rest of them fine if you're doing ag exemptions, April 30th, but really the next one is May 31st. Big circle around that date. That's the date that you are going to file your protest. You're not going to file early. Your notice of appraised value is going to be in the mail starting tomorrow, the 8th. They've been at the printers since Monday. We've had the values since Monday, and we're frankly horrified. So there's going to be plenty of outcry from the public, but the worst thing you can do is get your notice and go, and turn it over, and I'm mad as hell, and mail it off. Because they will schedule you for a hearing on June 1st, the first day of formal hearings, and you will lose your protest. We call it Bloody Monday. Why? The first guy out of the foxhole is shot every time. You do not want to be the first taxpayer out there. You want to be the last taxpayer. And you are afforded under some new code that we actually kind of halfway sponsored 2 or 3 sessions ago to allow a taxpayer a one-time, for no reason at all, rescheduling of your formal hearing. So 2 tactics I'm telling you about right now. 1, file on the last day or near to it. File on May 31st. Don't file early. I advise filing by mail or in person. I would not use the online protest process. While they have made it better and better, it's really not the way to go. It stops your interaction with the staff because obviously the purpose of that is to eliminate the staff and have you deal directly with their computer, and that's not to your benefit. So you file your protest very near the end of the protest period, and when you get your hearing notice, you immediately call them and reschedule it for another day. Now, I will tell you that this year, the appraisal district, is pretty well riding on our back to certify the roll. Because we file the majority of the protests in the county every year as a firm, and so we're being scheduled throughout. We're starting our hearings April 18th informally with the staff. We're going to be working every single day until May 31st. And the public is not going to be there. It's just going to be us tax agents talking with the staff. So they're not going to schedule you for any, I imagine the first hearings in June will probably go to agents. So as a taxpayer, you may not even get scheduled until July, which is great. That gives you some time. And we'll talk about what to put on your protest. In fact, if you'll turn the page, the first thing we would talk about Number one on the list of 8 things you need to know about your property taxes is that your property tax appraisal is required by law to be 100% of market value, and underlined, be equitable in comparison to the tax appraisals of similar properties. So on your protest form, you're going to check 2 boxes. They're the top 2 on the form. Sorry, I get louder. You're going to check market value is above market. That's the first protest. It's the first box. I checked that. The second one is the second one right below it. Says value is unequal in comparison to similar properties. You're going to check that. Both of those protests are viable. One of the things I always tell Laura and her clients is if you just because you paid that for your property does not mean that's a fair tax appraisal. 2 different measures. On the market value side, we're measuring your tax appraisal compared to the selling prices of similar properties. That's a market value determination. The other side of it, you're comparing your tax appraisal to the tax appraisals of similar properties, regardless of what they sold for. But I've got my 2,600 foot house over here in Spicewood, and by golly, I'm at 420,000. But I got a bunch of them that are same size, same kind of 1970s vintage. Some of them been fixed up a bunch, and they're tax appraised down here in 350. Why am I at 420? So even though you may have just paid 450 for that house, if you can find enough comparable properties that are very similar to yours and prove that their tax appraisals are much lower, then you forget about market. It doesn't matter what you paid for your house. What matters is what kind of value the appraisal district has assigned to similar properties. And that is a really difficult thing for taxpayers to do. It requires a good bit of your time that maybe, I have found it's just easier to bring in somebody to go do it for you, which has been where our industry came from, at least on the equity side, because we have such ready access to all the data, and you're going onesies and twosies on the website. It will take you forever to find all your comparables, and we can do it in 3 minutes. And by the way, also as a personal favor, we are very happy to. The company-wide we can't do it, but if you have a particular appraisal issue or a particular question, and you're just not sure whether you want to do it or not, email me, email her. She'll forward it to me. I'll reply to both of you with what I can tell you at that point, and advise you as best I can without you becoming a client. We are, of course, taking on clients, so we're happy to do that. By the way, almost all tax agent firms now operate on a contingency fee, where you don't pay anybody up front, you don't pay anybody to do this. We take a percentage of what we actually save you in doing the appeal for you. And if we fail, there's no fee or no fees of any kind. And so we have every incentive to dive on that dime because, we get 40 cents out of that, or 4 cents out of that dime. So it's a kind of a win-win. It has been for me for 30 years now. But back to the market value and equitable. 2 different appeals. Those of you that have done appeals in Travis County and even in Williamson, you've been handed a grid, right? A sales comparison grid and an equity comparison grid. Those grids make adjustments, like any appraiser does, for the differences between that sold property and your property. And we're going to go through that methodology, line by line, really. It's a fabulous, it's really a very good system, and it comes out with good values like any computer, garbage in, garbage out. These have to be truly comparables to really give you a good indication of value. And another thing, I have no clue what your house is really worth. She does. She and her agents know what your property will trade for, which in your mind is what your property's worth. The tax appraisal is a mass appraisal. The object is much more on equity of valuation and uniformity of appraisal than it is accuracy. If any of you are shooters like I am, what we're looking for is grouping, not hitting the bullseye. We're looking for a tight group. Let me just briefly, I want to go through the exemptions real quick. I don't see anyone here that probably is availing themselves of the very best exemption we have, which is the over 65. That is a fabulous exemption. It is very powerful. I've made a number of addresses to statewide organizations on the over 65. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask on this over 65, is it appropriate, is it just for the year, like my husband turns that in October? So next year, for the full year, or am I dreaming that at some point there was the year they turned 65, you could claim it, or am I?
Your memory is excellent. Indeed, it is the only exemption in this property tax code that is retroactive. So if you turn 65 in October of this year, you are entitled to the exemption for the entire year. It's a fabulous thing, and I recommend all of you get old quick. You want to be 65 in the worst way for this kind of purpose anyway. So we'll talk about that. The regular homestead exemption, though, is obviously the one that most of us have, and I assume that you know for a fact that each of you do have your homestead exemption on your primary residence. If you don't, you can always go backwards and get it. If you fail, if you have a friend or someone you know who didn't get their homestead last year, you can still go back and get it. You can get the current year, which is now 2016, plus one more. So up until January of next year, you can still file a 2015 homestead exemption. Now, what does the homestead? I see you peering around. I wish I was taller. I've always wished I was taller. If you would, if you want to go down and file your homestead exemption, it's easy, it's online. And the beauty of the homestead exemption, it does two things for you. First, it exempts a little bit of value off of the total market value of your property before they apply that tax rate. So right now it's $25,000 off for the school for a normal homestead. You might recall we just voted that last November, and unsurprisingly we all voted to increase that exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. So you get $25,000 off the school. The county gives you 20% off the value for your homestead. So if you've got a $400,000 house, there goes 80 grand that you're not paying taxes on. So that's a good thing. That's the exemptions part of the equation. The more important part I have found, at least in this market, because Austin, our market moves up and it doesn't ever seem to go down. It did once, but it doesn't seem to go down much. But we have been appreciating at more than 10% a year for a long time here. I mean, most values are up most of them have doubled in the last 7, 8 years easily. But when it's your homestead, you now have two values. You have the market value that they're proposing, $400,000. You then have a taxable value. And the taxable value of your house can never increase more than 10% from one year to the next unless you've made improvements, generally additions to your property. So if you haven't added square footage to your home, generally that's going to be true. Last year's taxable value plus 10% is the most that you can pay on. I have a little condo here in town that I use as a hotel. I have a residence out of town, but I live in both. So I put my homestead on this little condo, and my value, admittedly a very low one, last year was the taxable value was $78,000 or $79,000. This year they've proposed a market value of $190,000 on my condo. So I went from 79, call it 80,000, to 190 in 1 year. All right, it's wrong. That 190 is wrong, but I'm not upset because I'm only paying on 88,000. So because the taxable value last year was 80, this year the most I can pay taxes on is 88. They could call it $500,000. It doesn't matter. I ain't paying on that value. And so when you get your notice of appraised value, you will see in the column it will say market value of improvements, market value of land, total market value. You'll see that. Those are the first three numbers in the chart. The next one below that is going to say taxable appraised value with possible homestead limitation. That's your 10% cap. And on that notice of appraised value, you're going to have 2015 and 2016. And you just look right at that homestead limited value. Did it change more than 10%? Probably not, unless you added a pool or made some changes or there's been a mistake made. We fixed plenty of homestead caps. But that number should only be 10% above the 2015 value. One caveat is the 10% cap only applies in the second year you have your homestead exemption and then each subsequent year. The first year you qualify for that exemption, by qualification means you own it January 1st, you occupy it as your primary residence, and you claim no other. It's really easy to qualify for. You owned it January 1st, you claim it as your primary residence, and you claim no other one in Texas. If you meet those criteria, then in the second year, first year you get your homestead exemption, say you bought in 2016 is going to be your first year getting it, no 10% cap. Sorry. It will apply the second year you own the property. So that's really the two things, I'll get to you, sir, is the exempt amounts that come off the top before they apply the rate, and then that 10% cap. That 10% cap is a beautiful thing. There were many, many bills filed the last 2 or 3 sessions to lower that cap to 3%, which would be devastating to the local taxing units. I mean, it would be devastating. You would take the majority of your appraisal roll and tie it to no more than a 3% increase a year. I cannot imagine that something like that would actually pass, but we'll see what Dan Patrick comes up with. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, if you didn't qualify for the homestead the first year you lived there, I arrived a few months late in, the place wasn't homestead the previous year, and then you come in the second year, it would be the third year after that you could only hit the 10%.
Did everybody hear that? He bought mid-year. There was no homestead in place on the property, so this next year was his first year. Now, really, it's the third year that he becomes 10% capped. And I will tell you, there's always an argument at the appraisal district regarding improvements versus repairs. If you take out the interior finish in your house, watch your building permits. That's what triggers them to look at it. Normally, there's too many properties. Travis Appraisal District is not looking at every house on any regular schedule. It's on a, did your neighbor rat you out? That's generally how they find unpermitted improvements. But when you put new floors in, unless you make major renovations, a kitchen, you put in a new water heater, a new roof, those are all repairs. You are simply repairing a short-lived item that has outlived its useful life, as opposed to adding on a new master bedroom, master bath, or mother-in-law, or, as is real popular in Austin now, the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit, the rental out back, so that you can get in on that South by Southwest money. So the homestead exemption is really powerful. It's really easy to get. It's easy to qualify for. You must have a Texas driver's license that has that address on it. So that catches a few people. But you can go online to DPS, and for $15, you can change the address on your driver's license to be that address. And you want to be sure the mail is going there. This is your primary residence, mind you. This does not apply to investment properties. So if you've got a duplex out there, unless you're living in half of it, in which case they do prorate the homestead exemption. If you only occupy a portion of the property as your residence and you rent out the rest, that part doesn't get the benefit of the 10% cap or the homestead exemption. Anything that produces income is investment and is not covered by the homestead exemption. So that's the homestead exemption. Real briefly, I want to talk. Yes, ma'am.
What did you call it? Homestead limited what?
The homestead limited value, I believe, is the verbiage they put on their notices.
And then we said outlived the natural use. Is that?
That's I'm referring to. That's an appraisal theory of short-lived components of a house, like the flooring, like the paint, like the stuff. All of that stuff wears out. We call those short-lived. And as you repair those, that's not an improvement to your property. You may think it is, but be careful of your vernacular. It's not an improvement to the appraisal district. That's simply a repair. Yes, it makes my house look better, but for tax purposes, it does not make it worth one more penny.
And that's how I word it. It's outlived its natural uses.
I would, sure. I'd say, not to get deep in appraisal theory, but we're talking about accrued depreciation. And the appraisal district has now, they have a really smart guy now in charge of the residential appraisal department. I mean, he is Mensa smart. Speaks one version of Chinese, and he'll just look at you and just talk, and you won't have any idea what he's saying. But he is really smart, and he's come up with a new depreciation schedule that I think will. What we're running into is the unremodeled houses versus the remodeled houses selling, and on the tax roll they're described the same. That's the major battle that's down there. Is this house has been gutted and it's beautiful, it's granite everywhere, and I've got my Formica 1970 house, and you're telling me that I should be the same as him. That's just not right. So Michael has tried to install a depreciation schedule that would put some space between those two properties but it's up to you to provide some evidence that your home, what the condition of your home is. Generally, I will tell you photographic evidence is the best thing of your home. And I will advise you right now, remember January 1st that we circled? On or about January 1st, I want you to go out in the street in front of your house on some rainy, awful day, cloudy day, and take the worst possible picture you can of the exterior of your house. That picture may save you $10,000 over the next few years. Because what's going to happen is later in the spring, and I'll show you how, you're going to get a list from the appraisal district of the comparables that they're going to introduce to defend their valuation. And you're going to go out on a beautiful spring day because the lawn is dead and there's no leaves on the trees on the picture of your house. It looks awful. Put your garbage can on the porch and make it look bad. You're going to take a terrible picture, but make sure you get the whole house. You're not hiding anything. You cannot hide anything in property tax appraisal. All they have to do is drive out there and stand out in front of your house. So taking pictures of the cracks in your driveway is just not persuasive evidence. You know, that kind of nitpicking is not going to get you anywhere. They call them taxpayer pictures, and I'm telling you, they just don't work. So you need a nice picture of a bad picture of the outside of your house, and then on that spring day, once you find out that these are the sale comps they're using, you're going to roll by puffy white clouds, beautiful, beautiful, and you're going to take a picture of that house. And then very subtle, but you go to the appraisal district, you go, these are your comps, and this is the dog I live in. You know, that picture is priceless. So, in addition to that picture, though, I do recommend that you take, not flattering and you know, not intentionally misleading by any means, but a representative picture of your kitchen, showing the flooring and the ceiling and the countertops. I mean, that's important, as she'll tell you, into the valuation of your home. The master bath seems to be of particular interest to the appraisal district. Has it been updated? Is it still the original? Anything that shows some wear, try not to take close-up pictures of carpet stains and cracks in your walls. That's just, you're wasting your time and theirs. They'll flip through them and just dismiss them and they'll hurt your feelings. So you want a representative picture of the inside of your house because either Laura, her staff, or you can go online at some points, I guess, and have access to the photos of the insides of those sold properties so that you can picture by picture go, look at this thing and look at mine. You can't tell me that sales comparison to here. And so that's really your most, and that goes back to being informed when you get there and have the right attitude. You know, carry in something that makes it easy for them, the tax appraiser, to make the change you want them to make. And by understanding the characteristics that drive their computer's valuation of your house, you can then focus on those characteristics and give the tax appraiser the reason that all they have to do is hit a button and correct this characteristic, and boom, your value is going to go down. Because relative to these other houses, your house is not in average condition; it's in fair condition. You know, it's showing a lot of wear. On the other hand, that home you're comparing me to is in excellent condition. And that's getting back to what Michael's trying to do with differentiating those two houses. So I suspect the system's going to get better as it goes. I'll blow over the over 65 exemption except for one thing. If you have a parent, and I'm seeing this more and more, a parent, any relative who is over 65 or Social Security disabled, who is going to be living in your home on a permanent basis, I would recommend that you investigate the possibility of a life estate to that person. What you're doing is you're saying, you're not selling your house to them, you're not giving your house to them, you are giving that person the right to occupy a portion or all of that house. And by doing that, that person can then apply for and get their own homestead exemption, or in this case, over 65 or disabled exemption. So you can, by virtue of your good deed of having your mom moving in, by golly, give her a life estate. She can then apply for the over 65. What does that do? It freezes your school taxes. They can never go up. It gives you tons more exemptions to drive down your value before the rate is set. The over 65 is a beautiful thing. It really is. But I've seen that used more and more. Yes, sir? Or are you just stretching? Okay, fine. And I'm happy to talk about anybody's individual. Another thing that I'm finding more and more is if your kid goes away to college and you buy them a kiddie condo, for goodness sakes, they're going to be living there. Give them a life estate. You own it. It's in your name. Give him a life estate. Then he can apply for his own homestead exemption. This was really important when we were in the foreclosure cycles back in 2001, 2002. Some of those West Campus condos were going pretty cheap by UT. And if you bought one of those at foreclosure, what do? You give your kid a life estate. The kid files a homestead exemption. Now you've got the 10% cap. And as that value goes up over the next 4 years, he's paying on no more than 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. A real good hint. A lot of people availed themselves of that. Veterans exemption of over 100%, the least we can do. I mean, if you are a service-related 100% disabled veteran, you shouldn't pay property taxes. Over in Giddings, we actually, all of us got together and bought a house, retrofitted it, and put one of those veterans in it. I mean, just thank you. So we all voted on that one and passed. This is number 5, ma'am, relates to that homestead limited value. That's where I described to you what to look for on the appraisal notice. Number 5, look for the appraised value with possible homestead limitation on the notice of appraised value. And you compare last year's to this year's, and it should be no more than 10% different. Your market value can be wild, as in my condo, 80, 190. That's a pretty big increase. It's more than double. But my taxable value, 80 to 88, boy, I'm relaxing. It doesn't matter what value they put out there. And in many cases, homeowners like you are in the same boat. And there's literally, unless there is good evidence for you to present to get your, on your appeal, to get it below the homestead limited value, I've many times advised people just let it go. I mean, if they've got you valued at 625 and your limited value is 500, I mean, you know, unless you can really prove that it's below 500, why bother? I mean, unless you change the underlying characteristics in their computer, whatever agreement you reach this year is going to be thrown out the window for next year. They're going to start over. So if you settle on an appeal this year, and I'm sure those of you that have done it over and over have found that to be true, the value generally only holds that year, and the next year they start over. So if you're not going to actually save any money, why go through the whole charade of appealing if to get your market value down when you're not paying on that value anyway? So that's one of the things for agents is, you know, first question on the phone is, what's your cap value? You know, you're yelling at me, telling me it isn't worth 625, but you're only paying on 500. So try to relax. That's a good hint there. Appraisal number 6, it goes back to January 1st. For heaven's sake, that's the effective date. You did take a picture of your property on January 1st. Add your swimming pool in February. Expand your house in the winter. Never do it in the fall. If you go out there in October, blast through the ground out here and put in a nice pool, it's there on January 1st, you're not going to use it all winter long, and yet it's there on January 1st and you're going to pay taxes on it the next year. Whereas if you start in February, it wasn't there January 1st, so you ain't going to pay taxes on it this year. It's on the next January 1st, you don't pay those taxes till the year after that. So you get 2 years out of your pool without paying property taxes on it. So start every improvements, not repairs, improvements are made in the winter. And you typically get a better deal from the builders anyway. So it's a good thing. Just don't do any improvements in the fall. You know, don't paint your house. Don't you know, you need that bad picture so that you can show them what it was like on January 1st. Statutory deadline for filing is May 31st. That's not really, I mean, it is a drop dead date in most circumstances, but there are several really, several excuses for getting in a late protest, if you will, and those are viable. They can be used. You really want to call our office and have a consultation. We don't charge for that, just to talk about your particular instance and why you're wanting to file a late protest. It's pretty easy for them if you write a letter out there going, I was really busy, and it's pretty easy for them to deny that late protest. We can kind of give you some phrases and ask you some questions to determine whether or not we think you really might have a chance at that late protest. Yes, sir.
But filing that on the last day, if you file it by mail, can you basically give it to the mail to the post office on the 31st, have them stamp it, and basically that's it? It was effectively filed.
Indeed, it is driven by the date that's stamped on the envelope. Now, An excellent question. If you're kind of the nervous type, and that's just going to keep you up at night, file it on May 25th. I'm just saying don't file it on April 3rd or April 10th. Wait until the end of May. We file all of ours. We take, of course, we're office right directly next door to the appraisal district, so we carry over a big stack, and they stamp, and we stamp them all that date. I advise certified mail return receipt in the alternative. Take them in and go down there to the post office, get them to do it, spend your $6, and you will get a receipt back attesting to it. Appraisal district, they handle a lot of mail and they lose things. And so anything you ever do to the appraisal district, and one hint I would give you is from now on, including this thing and communications from Laura Beth, you want to build a folder, a little manila folder that has everything to do with property taxes in it. Because property taxes is a paper-driven industry. You should always have paper evidence of what you gave them and what they gave you. Electronics is great, but it disappears at times. And that paper evidence, and I guarantee you'll go back to that file again and again and again in preparation of your federal taxes, for instance, because that's where your tax bill is. And there's a photocopy of the check you used to pay them. And there's the receipt. So just keep that manila folder going over the years, and I think you'll find it will benefit you. We already talked about those things. Let's see. I don't think I missed anybody that had a hand up, but if I did, are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I get this from my clients a lot. Are they going to tie the tax appraisal district? Do they have any access into MLS?
An excellent question. They will deny it, but they do. Someone each year hands them a disc, or now a stick, and they get all the sales. They may or may not put them all in their system. We are finding that sometimes the low ones don't make it, but they have the access to it. Burnett, for instance, Burnett CAD is a member of the Highland Lakes Board of Realtors. Travis has tried over and over and over, and our board of directors, I'm a broker, our board of directors has steadily denied it. Direct access. But since it's so easy to download now, for us agents, some agent or appraiser is currying favor with the district and annually providing them that data. So they've got it. I will tell you, we voted last fall, you may have remembered on the ballot, what did we do? We voted to permanently prohibit any type of transfer tax or sales tax on the sale of real estate in Texas. That may sound not important, but it really is. What I have always said is that the reason the appraisal districts are pushing for disclosure of sales information is, they'd like to have that data, but they've already got it. They've already got that in the residential MLS. What they really want to do is get the camel's nose under the tent and eventually put a sales tax or a transaction tax on the sale of real estate. That's what they wanted to do. And by voting for a constitutional amendment last fall, which passed overwhelmingly, they can never do that now. I mean, we'll have to vote again to get it done. Which is the same reason we many years ago voted for a constitutional prohibition of an income tax. We voted on that, which means the public is going to have to vote again to install any kind of income tax in Texas. Which, of course, all that does is mean we're going to rely heavily on the property tax. But that prohibition of a sales tax, because a 3% sales tax on, well, imagine the billions and billions and billions of dollars of property that's sold every year. What if you could just put a 0.1% sales tax on it? Oh, that would be very enticing to the politicians. So I'm glad TAR and our Texas PAC sponsored that legislation to prohibit it permanently. And so now I am not nearly as unhappy about disclosing sales to the appraisal district. I mean, they've got it anyway, but now maybe we can formalize their methodology and maybe call them on the carpet for not having the low ones, but having all the high ones. Somehow those low ones don't make it. I don't know. We've already talked about all this stuff here. And so this is great. I'm seeing lots of attention here. Yes, ma'am.
For the people that are here tonight for Williamson County,
yes.
Is there anything majorly different between how you would file or protest against
An excellent question. Did everyone hear it? She's asking for differentiation between Travis and Williamson. All the deadlines, the property tax code, even though we sometimes say it stops in Pflugerville, it doesn't seem to be saluted in Williamson. It is. Pardon me, all the deadlines are the same. I will tell you that there is a very misleading date on the notices of appraised value that are already out from Williamson. They have a May 3rd protest deadline on there. That is not right. That is complete. It's not illegal, but they do it so they get people in early. And Alvin Langford, the chief appraiser, will tell you that. You know, we can't enforce that. It's May 31st statewide in every county. But you will see on your little notice from Williamson that it says May 3rd. Sorry?
It's May 2nd.
May 2nd. You will see it, it changes every year, but it's just wrong. I mean, you cannot do that. The statutory deadline is May 31st. In terms of other differences between the two appraisal districts, the two that stand out to me, equity appeals are generally not saluted in Williamson. Now, I haven't done appeals up there in forever. Probably 7 or 8 years since I've graced their doorstep. But my reports that I get back are that equity, that is your tax appraisal compared to the tax appraisals of other homes, is not nearly as effective in their appraisal district as it is in Travis. Why? I will tell you, and I've already explained to Cameron here, that the Williamson appraisal district is substantially more accurate than Travis. They have fewer properties, more homogeneous properties. I mean, it's pretty easy to do Sun City, it's not like Terrytown or Pemberton. So Williamson is, 1, much more accurate in their valuations. 2, they don't seem to like equity much. 3, they try to fool you on the date. 4 is they use time adjustments. So if a property sold in January of 2015, they will apply a factor to increase that sale price up to what they say it should have sold for on January 1st, 2016. And at times that has approached 10%. Last year in Round Rock and in Liberty Hill it was 9% per year. So if you sold for 400, they're going to put it into their sales grid at 463. Or excuse me, 436, 9%, 436 above. So you're going to see that the sale price doesn't match what's in their grid. The difference is that time adjustment. They're one of only two districts in the state that does it. Lucky you for Williamson. Travis does not do that. They just take the sale price at its face and use it. One of the things that people want to ask about is, what are the time frame for the selection of sales comparables? In the past, the statutory rules are 24 months. In reality, with the velocity with which our market moves here, they limit it to generally January 1st of the preceding year and the end of February of the current year. So this year we'll be using sales that sold from January of 2015 through February of 2016. Now, the appraisal district has made a real effort this year. We've had several meetings with them to focus on those sales from July of 2015 through February, just the last 6 months rather than the full 12. That's kind of their backdoor effort to get that time adjustment in there by not relying on sales from early in the year but later in the year, closer to the appraisal date of January 1st. So there'll be arguments about that, but generally it's January 1st to February 1st of the following year. That's your pool of potential sales comparables. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the grid a couple times. Where did you find that?
Excellent. That was just good. Thank you so much. Good job. It's right where I was going to go. We're going to talk about the guts of how TCAD does their evaluations. And those grids are really the tool that the appraisal district uses to review their own work, essentially. What they're doing is they set values and then they use these grids to come up with an indicated value for your property, and then they compare that to what they really valued it at. And if that grid indicates a lower value, generally that's no problem. They'll put that value in. They'll go to that lower value. Great. It's only good for 1 year, but they go for that lower value. If, on the other hand, that grid indicates your tax appraisal is fine or even low, then they probably are not going to offer you any relief that year. because that grid. So what becomes the determining factor? The factor is what sales go in that grid, or what comparable properties go in that grid. And that's the most important, that's the art of our job. Get rid of the high ones and keep the low ones. You know, and actually I would amend that to say, certainly from our firm, and certainly the appraisal district is very grateful for this, our attitude is we want the best sales in there, the most representative sales. We're not out there trying to compare your house to a shack and claiming that your value ought to be what the shack is. We're using the best comparables. And certainly your realty agent, Laura, she can explain that to you. And maybe even provide you with some sales that will help. But I'll tell you, just because it's sold lower, you know, if your house is at 180 a foot, overall, total value divided by total square footage, 180 a foot. Well, there's a bunch of sales here for 140 a foot. Yeah, they may or may not indicate your value is too high. So let's talk about those factors. I didn't bring enough for everybody. I don't think I did. Let me look. I've got a sample appeal that, let's see if I've got a few of them. Sample appeals. Well, I do have a number of them. These are really handy. As far as they go, I would ask you, maybe at this point we might have to double up and just share. If somebody came with you, share with your neighbor or something. This is a sample of the appeal, and it's going to help me explain to you what the factors are that the appraisal district uses to make comparisons between properties. And these are the factors. Remember, I mentioned earlier the characteristics that drive their computer's valuation of your property. Well, those are the very characters, or the very characteristics that are in the grids. So you're going to have a summary page from our computer, and then a couple of grids behind it. And I assume everyone here has been either to the WCAD or the Travis Appraisal District's website, and you've looked up your property and you clicked on improvements and went down and saw the line item, how big your porch is, how big everything is. That data is what drives this information. Now, we of course electronically download we get all the tapes from the district. So this is a really interesting case. I've done the best I can to kind of anonymize it. But starting down, and I apologize so much for the quality of this, but going down the left-hand side, the first thing you want to verify on your property, you will see IMPR square feet. That's your improvement square footage. That's a fundamental characteristic of your house. You need that to be correct or on the conservative side. That number needs to be right. And what is that number? That's the heated and cooled area of your house measured from the outside. So it does include the brick ledge, stucco, whatever's on the outside of your house. From one corner to the other corner, go all the way around your house. How much is encompassed in that thing? Heated and cooled only. You don't count storage areas that aren't. You don't count your garage, porches. All those are accessories. Yes, sir.
So for condos, it's the interior ones?
Condos, it's driven by the condo declaration. Okay. Whatever it says on the condo declaration is what the appraisal district is going to use, regardless of what measurements you bring in. So make sure that declaration comports with this, or is on the low side. So you got the square footage right. That's an important thing. The next thing down, and this is what we call random, capricious, and arbitrary determination on the part of the appraisal district. You see neighborhood code. Aha! That code determines the pool of properties that the appraisal district will readily accept as comparable to your house. So in this instance, bless you, in this instance, I believe it's K1000? Yes. So, K1000 contains, in fact, if you look right above that, you'll see there are 100, if you can't hardly read it, but in the block directly kind of up and to the right from the square footage, you'll see the number 1,334. There are 1,334 properties in neighborhood K1000. To the date I printed this, on that date, there had only been 2 successful appeals. Huh? That's not a very good ratio. We track every single hearing. We get updates every day from the district of how many appeals were heard that day and what the results were. so that we can track if a neighborhood is going down. We quick look and see if we have any clients in that neighborhood. If we see it crashing, but we're there every single day watching it. And so we can track with great degree of accuracy any reductions that any of your neighbors have gotten. So if they try to brag to you, I'll be happy to prove they're fibbing. So K1000, that's important because it determines the pool of properties that they will compare to you. What that drives is a number. Oh, let me back up just a little bit. To the right of your square footage, you'll see a thing called class or classes. And you see WW4 minus. You all have probably looked up your property and wondered what in the world, what is this class? Well, it's a numeric system. I'll get to the alpha in a minute, but the numeric system goes from 2 to 8, with 2 being a hovel, 3 being a post-war shack, window unit, well not shack, but asbestos siding, window units, a very simple Crestview post-war house, unupdated. 4 is a tract house. That's your NPCs, your Milburns, the vast tract houses. Not so many of those. 4 plus, you're getting up to a better tract house. 5 is your Newmarks, your upscale volume builders. That's a 5 house. 6 is your first level of a custom house. Most of the homes around here in this immediate vicinity are going to be 5s. Most of them. Big lots. You're not going to find your floor plan the next block over on the same lot. They're upscale from a volume, true tract house. 6 goes into custom. 7 is the first level of luxury. 8 is an amazing house. We're talking $300 a foot construction cost and up. And there are rumored to be 9s. A home so nice as to blow your mind. And there is, of course, Booth is building a 50,000 foot house right out there on 2222. Behind that 14-foot wall with the Blackwater guys on top of it is a 50,000 foot house. It's an amazing thing. Directly across from the Austin Country Club. You saw it on TV during the World Championships 2 weeks ago.
Who's Booth?
Booth is a hedge fund trader from Portland who retired here after the tech boom in 2000. And he got in cahoots with Michael Dell, and they've traded a bunch of properties. And he's now got 44 acres with, he may have camels on it, I don't know. It's an exquisite thing he's building. And I'm happy for it. I mean, he's going to pay plenty of taxes, let me tell you. $1 million house, taxes are $22,000 a year. It's a lot of money. Even for a guy, somebody that owns $1 million house. So, WW4, the first character describes what is holding up the house. Generally, it's always going to be a W for a wood frame. There are some S's for steel. There are some M's for masonry. Some people have rock houses. Some people have concrete block houses. So wood frame is going to be about 90% of it. The second character describes the predominant, the majority of the exterior cover of your house. In this case, it is wood with a wood exterior. So we call that in the trade a frame house. It's wood on the exterior. Most of the time out here, you're going to see WV, which would be wood with a veneer of brick or stone, because that's the predominant cover. If you've got 3/4 of your house, front, sides, and the back is masonite, or now hardy board, that's going to be a WV. A little hint here: we do what we often look for bifurcations, and that is a 2-story or multi-story house where the second floor a lot of times does not carry the same exterior cover as the first floor. You may have a brick house on the first floor, and the second will be all hardy board, or just brick on the front and hardy on the sides. That second floor should be a WS, wood with siding, which is about $10 a foot cheaper than wood WV. So if you've got a home that is not uniformly covered on the outside, that area which is inferior, the siding, you can get a discount for that. They'll correct that with a photo. That's an easy one. And it's $10 a foot. I mean, it's worth something. If you've got 700 feet upstairs, then you get it from a WV to a WS, you just took $7,000 off your value. Saved yourself $200 in taxes. Yay. For a photograph, yes ma'am.
The S stand for?
Wood with siding, they call that siding. There is on the appraisal district's website, I think they have that. If you'll send me an email, I have a whole chart on this, but the district also produces one. And I'll throw this out there. When filing your protest, when are we going to file it? May 31st. On that protest, you're checking values above market, value is unequal in comparison to similar properties. And then you're going to skip down to step 6. I think it's step 6, it might be step 4, you'll see it. It says, please give any other information that will help us to resolve your appeal. And in that, you're going to write the magic words. Request taxpayer information packet. Aha! Those are the key words that forces the appraisal district to send you in advance of the hearing their data, their grids, all the comps. That's how you get in advance of your meeting with them all the data you're going to need. Request taxpayer information packet. Yeah, it will come. You've seen the movies, the Matrix movies, and the guy somehow can guide this thing by seeing strings and numbers going up and down. Well, that's what this looks like. There is a legend at the top, but it's just columns of numbers. And you will eventually become familiar with them. We can sort on each of those columns. You're going to have a static piece of paper in front of you. But you will see you'll know now what your characteristics are, and you can start looking for properties that are like yours that maybe have inferior characteristics on them. And those become your comps. So the request taxpayer information packet will give you the sales grid that they're going to use against you, or the sales they're using to support their value. It's not an adversarial process. It really isn't. We're all trying to get to the right number and a fair number. So you're going to get a list of that. You're going to get your sales grid. You're going to get an equity grid. It will have 10 properties in it that they have supposedly randomly selected in their computer to compare that tax appraisal, your tax appraisal, to those 10 others. Those are your equity comps. And if you've got your taxpayer information packet, you have all the information on 1,334 properties, not just 10. So that's where you get your ammo for your 10, is out of that big long list of all the other appraisals. By the way, you'll also have the tax appraisals of every home on your street, every home near you. I mean, it is really an interesting thing. You really only need to get that once, and then you know 1 year, because I don't know how big it's going to be. That's a pretty big neighborhood. Your neighborhood's probably going to be more like 300 houses. Typically, the bite is not so big as this one. This is Travis Heights. This is everything south of the river, north of Olin. So it's a pretty wide variety of houses, this neighborhood. So looking down, WW4. Go back down. We know the square footage. I want to talk briefly about effective year before I go into the rest of it. Homes that were built in the 70s or the 60s around here, or even the 80s, many of them, most of them have been dramatically updated. Many of them have. And so in the appraisal theory, there's something called the actual age. That's the year that you took out the permit. It was built, 1976. A zillion of them around here. But the effective age of that house, due to all the upgrades and remodeling that's been done over the years, the effective age of that house, in this case, was determined to be 2000. So they've made that house 50 years newer than it actually is when they start their calculations. So that effective age is eminently arguable. I mean, and again, that representative photograph of the inside of your house is what's going to determine the effective age. You know,
About how much improvement can you do and still stay to the true?
Stay to the actual age. It varies by neighborhood. There's really no hard and fast rule. You know, generally, if it's now a 2000 house and it was built in 1950, that house has been completely gutted, probably to the studs. I mean, I would expect, if you're going to tell me it's 50 years newer, I better have completely new electric, completely new plumbing. You know, not just the fixtures, but all new wiring, all new plumbing. You know, if you have any bit of the actual original guts of your house, it can't be that new.
So how do they determine where it falls? Like
Uh,
1990s house?
I will tell you that determination of effective age has evolved over the years. It used to be that they used it as a plug. They if a house sold high, they would, well, it must be nice, and they would change the effective year, thus raising the value of the house closer to the selling price. So that procedure has they're not supposed to do that, but the vestiges of that are all over the appraisal roll. I mean, I imagine this change to this house was done many years ago, putting it in 2000, probably when it sold in the early 2000s.
And that would be in our...
That would be in your information packet. It's also available online. When you look at the description of your house, it'll have actual age, effective age.
Oh, okay.
And you'd like those two to be the same. And if you haven't done a bunch of the guts of your house, updating it, if you've just done floors and toilets, no, I need to be the actual age.
Yeah.
And what that does is it gives you more years to accumulate depreciation. So you really want it to be the actual age and not this effective age. Because what they're doing is shorting you on depreciation over here, which is what raises the value. So the effective age is a legitimate concept. It's a way to differentiate between homes that have not been done and homes that have. And the appraisal district is relying more and more on it, but I don't really trust their data because I know how it was used in the past, and it was abused a good bit. You're looking excited, like I need to stop.
Well, we're a little bit over time, so I wanted to, maybe we could,
I'm happy to talk to any of you individually. I teach a whole course just on these grids, and I'm happy to talk to you about them, and I really appreciate your time. I'll stay as long as anyone wants to talk.
let's give him a round of applause.